Hey everyone, welcome to Mighty Forces. I'm your host, Amanda Hirsch. If you're someone who gives a damn about other people, about the state of the world, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Take a load off, let your hair down, and get ready to go deep. And to get stupid. Because in my experience, the best conversations with the best people share both of these characteristics. Let's start the show. My guests today are Venu Gupta and Maryam Banikarim. I met Venu when she was halfway around the world in Tanzania. We met by Zoom. And I'm about to meet Maryam. We've never met before, but I learned about her work through Venu and was fascinated and inspired and wondered if she might like to come on this podcast and talk about it with us. And to my delight, she said yes. So you're going to hear us talking today about something called The Longest Table, which is a project that Maryam and her neighbors started in New York City in COVID times as a way of bringing neighbors together to break bread. And of course, the topic of breaking bread brings me back to my guest from episode 2, Maryam Cohen. And if you haven't heard that episode, I highly encourage you to go back and check it out. And she's in conversation with Sarah Fensky-Bahat. I feel like I'm creating a connect the dots activity in a kid's workbook because this conversation reminds me of Marit. Marit was on my show with Sarah. I met Sarah through Venu. I mean, it's like 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon, except instead of Kevin Bacon, it's these amazing humans that I have the good fortune of knowing and being in conversation with. And you know, I'll share on a personal note, I've gone through a bit of a rough patch recently, and as embarrassing as it is, or silly as it may sound, listening to my own podcast has been a comfort to me. And I say that even though it's kind of an embarrassing thing to say, because it's really driven home for me as this year comes to an end, the exquisite beauty and power of human conversation, not text exchanges, but true conversations with room to breathe. And that's got me really thinking about what Maryam has done with The Longest Table in terms of bringing neighbors together into conversation. And just grateful for this space that I've carved out in my own life and to these humans who have agreed to share their time and their hearts with me and with us by joining me on this podcast this season. So get ready to hear a conversation that will at least be about connecting with neighbors around food, why that matters, and family, and why that matters. Thanks for listening, and let's get to it. Here we are. We have hit record. We've done it. Welcome, Venu. Welcome, Maryam. I'm so happy to have you here today. And now we segue from the juicy conversation we were having before we hit record to the conversation we have after.
Which will be more juicy, right? Yeah. I mean, we're gonna bring it in.
Oh yeah. We've had a social commentary portion of the conversation. We've talked about the decor of your son's bedroom, Maryam. I mean, for those who are watching, you can get a little visual of Batman coming at you from behind Maryam there. Venu, you're a little cagier with your backdrop. Yeah. We can't really deduce much about you. Now we can.
Deduce away.
That's beautiful art.
Deduce away.
I don't know what I deduced from that artwork. Tell us about that. For people who are listening, it's a very, yes, it is a Rorschach test, kind of. It's an original piece of artwork.
I got it in Tanzania when we were traveling. It's actually a sort of, I got this all in the same gallery. Sort of like Afrofuturism, futuristic. Yeah.
I love that. And I think I met you when you were in Tanzania. which is a fun thing to say. I don't think I can say that about anyone else I know. We met on Zoom when you were in Tanzania, and I was in this room here in New York. And I'm still here. You've circumnavigated the globe, and I'm still here in Hyde Park. That's excellent. It's very funny because at first it looked like you had this blank white backdrop, and then you pan to reveal the Afrofuture triptych. And so, there's a metaphor there about don't assume someone's blank white backdrop or something, right?
And who has triptych just at the forefront of their vocabulary, Amanda? Nice work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I want to hear first, before we start talking about The Longest Table, which is Maryam's brainchild, which I'm deeply inspired by. And Venu, you were involved in hosting a Longest Table in Chicago. And so I want to hear about that. And it doesn't surprise me that you were involved in that because it seems very aligned with what I know about you. And so there's so much to explore in terms of connection. In the spirit of that, I want to know how you two first connected. How do you two know each other? Either of you want to go first on that?
Well, I can go first, and then maybe you'll correct my memory because who knows what I remember anymore. Venu and I were both Truman Scholars. After President Truman, there's a living memorial, which is the Truman Scholars. Venu and I happen to be part of a living memorial of presidents, which is what we all do. And we were reconnected in Chicago because I was asked to host a event for Truman's in Chicago, actually by Chris Coons, who is also a Truman Scholar. And I think I had moved there. I hosted a fundraiser for him. This was before he was on TV all the time. And I think then he said to the Truman people, there's a live one that you're not in touch with, Maryam. Maybe you can get her to host something. And then I hosted an event for Truman's, and we've become fast friends ever since.
Yeah. Live one, I think, was a good description of Maryam. Yes, that's totally true. You'll see a theme with her as we have this conversation. If there is an opportunity to connect and gather people, she's so she's so ready for it, whether it's a small lift or a big lift or like she's someone I admire and respect and also am just kind of in awe of in terms of her desire and ability to just keep bringing people together in all sorts of ways.
Well, that's a lovely tribute. It
is. I don't know what she's talking about.
Well, Maryam, before we get into Longest Table, is that a quality of yours that you've been aware of like for a long time? I mean, is that align with how you think about yourself?
No, of course it's.
She's a New Yorker, Amanda.
No. I mean, I do love to gather people. I was a kid who, I think my happiest times were when the house was full. I was raised in a generational home, actually, with my grandmother on my mother's side. And my favorite memories were when they lived in a house in the middle of Tehran and, the neighbors' walls touched and we would play soccer in the alleyway with the other kids. Like just being with other people was always a happy place for me. And I think then, obviously there was a revolution and we moved all over. But I think that loss of community was probably something that I then sought out in different ways. I mean, now I can say maybe belonging is something I wanted for myself, but really for everyone. Mm-hmm. But it's not like it was an intentional thing. It was just something I did. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, I was always, if somebody was left out, I was always like, why don't you join us? Like, I don't understand people who don't have that gene, honestly. Because it doesn't cost people much to just be a little bit more generous.
Well, that's lovely. That's lovely. Well, let's just get right to it then. So then it's COVID and you have this idea. Walk us through it.
Yeah, it's COVID and I'd been in place for much longer, right? I'd been a chief marketing officer with jobs that had me flying around, all over the place. But all of a sudden I was in New York City in COVID and I had a job, but I was at home, right? It was a time where we were all in place. And so I got to know my neighbors in part because I guess it was a necessity. People needed to know their neighbors to figure out where there were Lysols in stock. But one of my neighbors said to me, "You've lived here next to me for 23 years. This is the longest conversation we've ever had," because I was always on the go, not because I wasn't interested. It was just I was never. There was no space, I would say. And I think we'd done a bunch of stuff to help New York City during COVID. So I had sort of seen the ability to people to come together. But honestly, I saw this picture. It was as simple as this. I saw a picture of what I now know to be Egypt and Iftar, of a group of people having a meal down a long street. And it just seemed magical. I mean, it was a very simple picture. I took a screenshot. I put it onto my personal Nextdoor app and said, what if we did this? What if we met with neighbors we've gotten to know and the ones we don't know? And I got a lot of reactions. I got over 200 reactions and 200 comments, which was significant on Nextdoor. And honestly, majority of it was positive. And, sometimes you can get negative commentary on social media. But
really?
I know we're all surprised to hear that. But it was an unusually positive response. And it was just a picture. It was kind of just a what if. And then the what if turned into my meeting 8 neighbors I didn't know and just trying it. And it was that kind of a simple thought, really. And then we rented the tables and chairs. 500 people showed up the first year. And then 700 and then 1,000. And this year we had over 2,000 who showed up. And now people stop me and say, I want to reserve a table for next year. And I'm like, okay, it's 6 months away. We don't start planning until, 8 weeks before. And it's become kind of an annual ritual in the neighborhood. But it's thrown by neighbors for neighbors in the way that Venu did it in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, let's thank you for that beautiful segue. Let's Venu, let's go to you in Chicago.
Like she's done this before.
Yeah. Yeah. So what inspired you to decide you wanted to host one of these events?
Well, when Maryam when she, watching her do these things, I mean, the longest table, I think, is the most recent iteration, but watching her do these things is incredibly inspiring. And so seeing photos from the longest table, and we would meet or talk, and she would describe it. And the word that she uses most often that I kind of remember is magical, and I love magic. And so she had been saying, I had said I would love to do this in Chicago, and really just didn't make or have the bandwidth to actually execute on it. And you know how sometimes things feel like they're going to be harder than they are. And so that's an impediment. Like you look at your sink of dishes and you think, that's going to take me forever. I don't want to do it, even though I want a clean sink. But then when you actually do it, it's not so bad.
I think the big question is moving from interest to doing, because we all have a lot in our lives. But Venu, of all the people we met, she's the one who ended up, getting to doing, which is what in the end it takes.
Well, and it's so interesting that you both have touched on this theme of, you're talking about the dishes in the sink and the difference between wanting the clean sink and actually taking the step to, and actually coming into today, that was something I wanted to kind of tease out, Maryam, because I think the three of us are generally, from what I can see, wired so that like we see an opportunity or a problem, and perhaps it's our orientation to do something about it, right? But there are a lot of people who might have seen the photo you saw and been like, oh, that looks so nice. I guess I'll never get to experience that in a city as big as New York. Or, oh, that looks so nice. And literally it just wouldn't, their next thought wouldn't be, I'm going to put a photo of this in this app where I communicate with my neighbors and see if anyone else wants to do it. And so I'd love to like kind of zoom in with both of you on that impulse, because I think it's such an important impulse in this moment in our world. I have an aspiration of, I would love more people to understand just how much they are capable of doing, and how it doesn't need to, it might feel like the impossible sink full of dishes, but in fact, sort of action begets energy, and it's not. So I would just love to hear you both kind of riff on, like, I don't know, either where you think that comes from in you. Has it always been the case? Have you always been someone who would have actually posted the photo and organized the dinner? Or can you think back to an earlier stage of your life where you might have just thought, looks like they're doing something cool over in Egypt,
I Venu, you go first.
Actually, Amanda, can I riff on the question?
Yes, riff.
Which I think is, because I don't feel that way about everything.
Well, sure.
And so what is it? I'm curious, like, what is it that allows anyone to get over the hurdle from, I don't know, like, this seems great. And like, I would love to be an astronaut. I'm not going to do anything to be an astronaut. Right. So what is the thing that how do people get over inertia of maybe seeing something they want to do and like bridging the gap between feeling like, oh, this seems cool, but I'm not the right person to do it. And so what I would say about that, or this seems important, but I'm not the right person to do it. So what I would say about that is that I think everyone's wired towards doing something about something, whatever is important to them. I think what helps is when you feel like you're not alone. Certainly, once I got a couple of people, once I was like, these two women in my building, once they agreed to do it, it was like, okay, that's like step one, like just making sure that I'm not carrying this alone. And then like walking through, like figuring out what the next, like one step at a time. And Maryam's team is really great because they have a whole playbook. But I just think like it could be even about showing up differently in this moment, given where our country is, right? Maybe you think that, I don't know, protesting against something is cool, but not for you. So what is the thing that feels like it's going to be for you? And I actually think that question, or like interrogating that in ourselves, is really important. I don't know. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question, but just a twist on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're in the vibe. You're in the vibe, Venu. Like that's what I'm thinking about is that gap between, and that gap between seeing a possibility and taking the action.
Yes.
Or also even just seeing that you could be part of the story instead of just watching the story unfold and having opinions about it. That impulse of, right, like, because there are some people, Maryam, who would have thought that will never work in New York. In New York, everyone's so isolated. No one's going to take time out of their busy day, right? Or who would have thought, who am I to invite neighbors to collect around a table? Like what qualifications do I have for that? Is it imagination? Is it confidence? Like, why are there some people who see the possibility to sort of be in the story and take the action and make the thing happen instead of feeling like it's all just happening to them?
I mean, it's I should just get on the couch. It's a deep psychological question. I think I was always predisposed to action as far as I can remember. I had a grandmother who could never sit still, right? Like she taught, she cooked, she sewed. I mean, she just was that person. And I very much, I think, took after her in that way. And my sister says, like, you don't need to recover, right? Like, I flew to Chicago, hosted a dinner, had a breakfast, got on the plane, showered, and then went to a gala, right? My daughter's like, I don't understand what you're saying. Why would you be showering and going to a gala, right? And then the next morning shot a podcast. So, I have so I don't want to minimize that, right? Like, I don't have as much need to sort of retreat and recover as maybe somebody else does. And that's not a judgment. It's just we're all built differently. But I think for me, particularly as a kid who showed up and was obviously an outsider, now I spoke English with no accent, so, things could have been much more difficult. But I think the way that I found belonging was by joining and doing. So I showed up in junior high. I, was dressed like a French schoolgirl because we'd come via Paris, and everybody was wearing Izod's and Calvin Klein jeans. So I stood out, pretty dramatically on the first day. And then they had me skip 7th grade because I spoke more French than the French teacher, and I was advanced in math compared to the class. So then I was like the brainy kid who was French. I mean, it was like just one label on your name after the next. And so I think I just joined everything in junior high as a way to just like find friends. And I joined softball. We didn't have softball in Iran. I joined bowling. I was a terrible bowler. So I think I was fortunate in that I wasn't worried about seeming cool. Right. And I think that that is an unlock in some ways because you're not worried about how others are going to perceive you, then you're not embarrassed to fail. So did I think that 500 people were going to show up? I had no idea. But I was willing to put everything into it to try. And, there are things you try and they don't work. But every day for, the 3 weeks leading up, I flyered along with other neighbors. So I'm not pretending that this was just me. But every night when I walked the dog at 11 o'clock at night, where my husband would be like, what do you do? Why are you taking those posters with you? Right. And I'd be like, I'm walking the dog anyway. I'm going to flyer. So it was like I was going to leave no stone unturned. Now, it still could have not worked, but the elbow grease wasn't going to be the thing that got in my way. And when I commit, I have no neutral drive, right? So like I'm just all in. So with other people, I just was like, I'm going to make sure as many people know. I went to the police station. It's hard to sometimes walk in and have them let you in. I must have gone 4 times. I was like, you should come. Everybody should come. Everybody's welcome. The housing project, the garden club, the ENT. And I really do believe that inherently people want to feel a sense of belonging and everybody should feel welcome. Now, if you don't want to come, nobody has to force you, but we should create spaces where everybody feels they have a seat at the table. And that takes intentionality and it takes being willing to try things that don't work. I tried to get people to sing one song together, which was not my idea, but I heard this idea and I was like, that sounds like an amazing idea. And I tried it, a few different ways. And somebody was like, who was a professional singer, he was like, that's not going to work on this street. And then somebody else was like, well, maybe we can do it this way, but we don't have enough singers. I was like coming back from a workout and I walked by a church and I heard people singing and like in my sweaty clothes, I go in and I was like, excuse me, are you singers?
I love that. I mean, I just love that unabashed and not, I love it. I love not caring if you're cool or if you're in your sweaty gym clothes, and just being bold enough to pursue what speaks to you, whether it's as a joiner, like you were talking about when you first got here. It wasn't like you were like, I'd like to start a drama club at this junior high,
softball team.
No, it was more like I'm joining. But you had the confidence to join, and then somewhere along the line that became a confidence to initiate. And I mean, we're better for it. But I think, it's interesting hearing about your stores of energy. I cannot relate. The pace that you're describing, I cannot imagine. You're making me think of one of my best friends from childhood who I think of as the Energizer Bunny. Like I just, and so it is. I like thinking about the philosophical question you kind of teed up, Venu, around getting over inertia and finding pathways into the right action. I like the idea of really acknowledging that we are all wired differently. And so it's not a one size fits all. It's not like, after listening to this podcast, I hope everyone goes and launches something just like The Longest Table in just the way Maryam did. Like you did it the Maryam way. I mean, Venu, what's the Venu way? What's something that you've launched?
But by the way, she launched The Longest Table in Chicago. I did not do it for her. So the way Venu did it was different than maybe I would have done it with different people, and it fit her neighborhood, which was different than mine. It's not this is not a replica. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's really true. I was just going to add one of the beauties of The Longest Table is because it's a playbook, not a or it's a set of steps, not a recipe. It's you take the set of steps and whatever happens for you, it could be minimal, it could be maximum, whatever it is, the magic is still there. And I think that word is the right word. I was just going to say, I think while many of us are not wired in the same way that Maryam is, I do think that if we allow ourselves, almost all of us, a few notable not so many, or not so much, but almost all of us can be wired to be compassionate. And so my way is, like, if I'm at a party and I see that someone's not talking to somebody, like, I'm unless I'm also like out of bandwidth, but it's like to go over there and make sure that they're somehow included in the circle. If I may not have the stamina that Maryam has, but I still can own and exercise the responsibility, right? Just in different ways. It's to make sure if there is somebody, I mean, it's really like somebody who can't reach something at the grocery store or at a store, and saying, hey, I see you. And I'm gonna, like, I just see you.
Yeah. So you use the word responsibility, Venu. So the responsibility, like at the party, if the person isn't being spoken to, or the responsibility at the store, if someone can't reach something. And I think that's an interesting word, right? Not an opportunity to help someone, but a responsibility. Like, do you believe? Is that right? I mean, do you believe that?
I believe it's true for me. And I think that it's I think if we're going to build a better building if we're going to build a better neighborhood, better city, better country, I think that we do have to feel some level of responsibility for each other. I think there are lots of forces that try to make us feel like we shouldn't feel responsible for each other based on one thing or another, that some people don't need care or don't deserve it, or that, it's just easy. It's so easy to divide and conquer, right? So I think if we saw it as a responsibility, we might end up someplace better.
Mm-hmm. I feel that responsibility. I believe each of you do. And I feel like most of the people that I populate my life with feel that responsibility. And I think something I've been thinking about a lot this year is just why some people feel that and some people don't.
Funny. I mean, it's an interesting word, right? Because it's heavy. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that's interesting about the longest table that I think is part of its magic is that we invite people to participate because it's a potluck. So whether you host it, whether you sweep the street, whether you do whatever, it's an invitation. And we hope that that invitation and the connections that you make at the table lead to other things. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we've done research for 3 years in a row, and pretty consistently what you find is 8 out of 10 people meet somebody new. They feel a sense of belonging. They're less lonely. And most interesting, they overwhelmingly have an inclination to participate. We don't ask you how you want to participate. We're just interested in, does it incline you towards participation? I don't use the word responsibility because responsibility feels heavy.
I think that's very true. I think you're right. And I think if we said you were responsible for coming to this table, there would be like 5 people there. So I think I think you're totally right.
And I think there's that dichotomy. And when you help, you feel better. Like I say all the time, like when things go bad, one of the best things you can do is volunteer because you feel better in helping somebody else. And helping somebody else, you help yourself, right? I do think we all need to feel a sense of agency. And I think part of the problem is not that people don't feel a sense of responsibility. Although, again, I tend to shy away from sort of the heavy words because I think it's become such a high bar that then it's hard for people to step in. But I think that we are very interdependent as a society. Yes. If you go back to Sebastian Unger, he wrote this book, Tribes, and he talks about tribes, like the inherent thing is belonging. Like, are you interconnected enough to share food at the fire pit kind of a thing? And that's as, sharing a meal, like breaking bread together, that is a ritual that's as old as time, right? And the way you regain agency as a kid who lost her agency, right? Because we got plopped out, moved over, is one tiny little step at a time. And the way you do that often is at a hyperlocal level. Like the garbage can's been missing. I don't know why people keep stealing the public litter garbage cans, which in Chicago you don't have, but it's where you throw dog poop in a little bag, right? They keep stealing them. I'm like, who would want those? But okay, whatever. But do you call and say, hey, sanitation department, the garbage cans are missing? Or do you just wait indefinitely? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, what is the place at which, once you begin to have agency, I think it begins to build like sort of muscle memory of like, oh, if I do this and something happens today, the garbage cans miraculously, this is the second time they've been stolen, are back. So you're like more inclined to call again because you're like, something actually comes as a result of it. You know, one of my favorite things about the longest table this year is I was walking up and down putting the flyers up again. And one of my neighbors, who is not the friendliest, you know, he usually has a dog who's not on a leash and wants to attack yours. So you're like crossing the street. And, you know, I always think to myself, like, why doesn't he just leash that dog? He must know that there's an issue. But nonetheless, he saw me and he was like, I was waiting for him to say to me, like, nobody's going to move their cars. Like, and he said, oh, I'm going to see you there. And I thought to myself, miracles do happen. And like, you know what? Like, I want him to feel included and welcome. And maybe that'll ease up his like curmudgeonliness, because how much does it cost you to leash your dog and smile when somebody walks by you? But I also recognize that like, I have no idea about what goes on with him on other times, right? So it's not a judgment, because who knows what's going on with anyone at a given point. And it's easy to want to, you know, yell back, which, you know, there are days I feel that way. And then I sort of say to myself, like, okay, I mean, like grace and trust. I think that's the thing that I have unlocked for myself at the longest table is you don't have to be in charge. You can just have grace and trust, and people do it in their own way. It's not have to be perfect. What does perfect mean anyway? Wouldn't we all? Nobody cares about perfection. It's about intent, that what we really care about in the end.
Okay, this is the sermon I needed. This is the sermon that I needed. No,
So
I mean it. I mean it, because I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, with everything that you just shared. And I think that energy of invitation as opposed to enforcement is key and is really hard. It's really hard for me to go, looking at what's happening in our country right now, to go around. I live in an area where people are of mixed political persuasions, and to go around feeling like I invite all of you to participate, right? You know, I invite you to realize how interdependent we are. I invite you all to care about each other, as opposed to getting stuck in a more rigid place of, you know, how can you not care about other people more? As cheesy as it is, though, it reminds me of Ted Lasso.
Can I say I love Ted Lasso, because you know what? I believe. I mean, it's the inherent thing.
Yeah, I used to have a little tin of mints that said "believe," but it's not on my desk anymore. But I that would have been a good prop.
I just want to add, for anyone who has not watched Ted Lasso, it's okay. I also have not watched Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Well, no, but just
Never too late. It's on streaming,
and it's coming back. But which may or may not be a good idea. We'll see. But there's a very well-loved scene in Ted Lasso where he tells this story. The character of Ted tells a story, and the message in the end is about the importance of being curious instead of judgmental. And I think maybe that sentiment originated with Whitman. I'm not sure if that's Walt Whitman. I don't know if that's accurate or not. So who knows where that wisdom originates? Okay, I realize it doesn't originate with Mr. Lasso, but I come back to that over and over again, because it is so easy to slip into judgment of self and others, right? And often when I'm feeling more judgmental of others, it means I'm probably in a place of feeling more judgmental of myself too. And the more I can just kind of have that touchstone of like, all right, let me try to shift this into curiosity. It helps me shift into everything you just spoke to, Maryam, which is a much more generative place to be.
Again, I didn't set out to give a sermon. I don't even know if I know how to give a sermon. But to me, the thing that's interesting is like the world seems so black and white, right? And our kids today, they seem to feel like everything is so binary. And what I know, just because of the experiences I've had, right? I had a father who drowned windsurfing. The many hits I can like list with ease. Means I was really good at compartmentalizing all these feelings away in order to be able to like put little steps in front of the other and not just curl up like a ball. But I think what you realize is like, you have no idea. Like, I smile a lot. It doesn't mean you have any sense of what's happened to me in the last half an hour in my home or, on the street or whatever it is. And there's times where I want to yell back too. And by the way, I'm sure I do. It's not like I'm perfect, but I think life is really just a lot of grace. And I think when you are a global CMO of a company, you manage from up high, telling people what to do. And what's amazing about the table is it's thrown by, we had 50 volunteers this year for Chelsea. I didn't know all of them when we started. I know them better now, but it's not like I do a background check. They all show up and start doing whatever they're doing. And you have to have grace and trust and not micromanage and tell them what to do, because what difference does it make if they put the chair exactly here or exactly there? In the end, what I want is for people to say, Venu, do you not know anyone? Let me introduce you to Amanda. Amanda, can you make room for Venu to sit and introduce her to your, like, who doesn't want that feeling? We all had terrible, shitty middle school experience. Yeah. Even if you were in the popular group, there was somebody who made you feel small. And why don't we live in a world where we just have grace and trust and not make people feel small, but make them feel big? Like, what would the world be like then?
Venu, I want to come back to you. So bring us in. I mean, we've talked a lot about The Longest Table, but we haven't really evoked the experience of it in this conversation. And so I wonder if you can do that a little bit for us. Like, just take us to you and your neighbors hosted an event in Chicago. Like, bring us into the day, and maybe is there a moment you can share or something?
Totally.
Yeah.
I have a moment that I love. And I also, I think what's important to know, at least from my experience, is in the background of like getting ready to host The Longest Table, right? Chicago, even though The Longest Table has no political agenda whatsoever at all, it is just to bring people together, right? In Chicago, what was happening is ICE was fiercely in the city. I'm sort of plugged into those issues, given my work, and I'm anxious. I'm an anxious person. So I was starting to get really hung up on like, maybe we shouldn't do this. I don't want to do anything that's going to call attention to people. Right. And it was like probably 10% excuse, but also because it was scary. It is like, who knows who's going to show up? And 90%, like, it's so, what is happening in the city is so uncertain. And Maryam was like, look, very gently was like, it's up to you, but you should, I think it's going to be okay. So I checked in with people. We decided to hold it. And I'm so, so glad we did, because it's an antidote to exactly what I was feeling, which is, let me hunker down privately, watch TV, and pretend that it will go away. So this is the moment. So it's a beautiful day outside, gorgeous. And the women in my building, Masami and Linda, we had already divided up the tasks, and we were waiting for the chairs and tables to arrive. And Maryam had gotten a sponsor for us for the chairs and tables, which was phenomenal. And we started to set up. And not now at this point, several members of the building are out, and some of the other people that Maryam had connected us to. There's a young man just walking down the street, and he's like, what are you guys doing? And we said, we're having this event. It's called The Longest Table. It's for everyone and anyone. The goal is to bring neighbors together to get to meet each other. He was clearly on his way somewhere. And then he said, do you need some help? And he started helping, like he started taking chairs out, started pulling tables. He's like, this is really cool. And this is not someone who had signed up. It's not somebody who was anybody new. And then he said, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to get my girlfriend and we're going to come back. We'll have lunch. And to me, that's like It was so joyful. And I remember having this feeling in something like I used to be in Key Club, which was a service organization in high school, probably tracks. And so, and I just remember feeling like all of the possibility that comes when you interact with somebody new.
I love that.
And I have for so long, I think, sorted and sliced and diced, even subconsciously, who I'm going to interact with and how I'm going to interact with them, that this, if I had not talked to him, I may have subconsciously or consciously made some assumptions, and there was no time. And it just it blew all the doors open of what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I love that. And it's wild. It's truly wild that we've gotten to a point as a species where it's like this profound remembering of and then I just talked to the person and they talked back to me and it felt so nice. And we're all like, what is this strange experience, I mean, it's wild to think we lived through every step that brought us here. This didn't just happen overnight. We've all been like the frogs in the pot as we've gotten to this point. But yes, that very beautiful, pure moment of interaction with a stranger, with a fellow human being, that feeling in the moment of connection. And you may never see him again, and that's fine. It's not about well, now we're best friends. I mean, it's just about that shared fellow humanity in a moment that
it is about humanity. But what it makes me think is it's like an invitation that opens up possibilities. Right. And so I actually had somebody send me a picture the other day. He was somebody who had performed. We'd had a musical number, Archive. They actually were nominated for a Grammy. And Jonathan sent me a picture of himself with people he had met at the longest table. He goes, look, we're hanging out. And I just thought that was amazing, right? He actually followed up and met other people and stayed in touch with them 3 years later at the longest table, or a year later at the longest table. And I hear people say, I lived in the same building with someone and it's the first time we've met. Or I discovered that I lived in the building with somebody I went to college with. We'd just never seen each other before. And now we're in running. Yeah. There's just magic that is possible if you open up the serendipity of third spaces.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because when we moved to the States, we moved to a suburb. And I remember as a kid, I liked school because there was energy, everybody was there. But then when the summer would happen, because it was a well-to-do suburb, which meant everybody lived behind shrubs, right? And the summer, nobody was around. I was like, where is everybody? There was a sense of going to Main Street in the hopes that other people would be there. And that is kind of the thing about the longest table, because it's a time-bound thing. So everybody comes at the same time. So there is this serendipity that happens of running into people, which is how in college, you ran into each other in the dining room. That's how friendships form.
Yep.
That's kind of what it's recreating, right? The serendipity of a third space that has you seeing people, possibilities, invitations, whatever. And we have fewer of those because now you get on the subway or you're walking down the street and you're like this. You're not acting with anybody.
That's right.
That's right.
Sweet friends, I have to go. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Can I ask you each, though, a close, really quick, because I ask everybody. Can I just ask you, and Venu, you can go first. This is a podcast for people who give a damn. What is something that's in your heart right now that you would like to say to anyone who's listening who, like you, gives a damn and is alive in this moment in the world?
I would say that, to echo something that Maryam said, suffering is inevitable. Everybody is suffering in some way or another. We don't know or see it. So why not act as if we have compassion for it, irrespective of who they are or whether we know them?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is a tough one. I mean, I want people to just smile at each other when they walk down a street. It doesn't cost you anything. You can just look up and actually smile. And it's amazing how just smiling at a stranger can change their day.
I love that.
It's not a heavy lift.
Thank you both. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And please take a few minutes and leave a review. That really helps the show find its people. Mighty Forces is produced by Amanda Hirsch and Haley Hatcher. The music of Mighty Forces was written and performed by Jordan Hirsch, aka my wonderful husband. Till next time, remember, you are a mighty force, and we're mightier together.